Hey everybody, Michael Snyder, Pacific Northwest Weather Watch. Happy Halloween. This is edition number 2 on the day, October 31st. We're taking a look at this atmospheric river pouring into the region, and we've got some new information. There are some wind advisories up, and we're going to take a look, and we're going to try to figure out what this area here is going to do tomorrow. How strong will this low be? How much wind will it kick up? All good questions. We'll try to answer that, and I'll show you what some of the weather models have been showing as I've been watching those today. So we're looking at air mass characteristics. You can see the warm subtropical air to the south, cold air across the Gulf of Alaska, and where the two meet is when you're getting that powerful jet stream rushing back into the Pacific Northwest with this atmospheric river. So taking a look at the Doppler radars, you can see it clearly. You're getting moderate precipitation across a lot of western Washington. We actually had a few lightning strikes up across northern portions of Vancouver Island. Looks maybe just an hour ago, maybe even not that long ago. But check it out. We lost the Camino Island for a bit here this evening, but it looks like it's back up now. So glad to see that quick repair, or maybe whatever happened is now fixed. Maybe a few sprinkles out of this activity, eastern Washington, Oregon, but a lot of the Willamette Valley south of Portland is doing okay still, although the rain is just now starting to move towards Portland, Oregon. Now, looking here at western Washington, wind advisory is up. Bellingham, Everett, Arlington, Seattle, Tacoma, Olympia, Centralia, Toledo, Hoquiam, and Forks, Washington are under this wind advisory. But this is not a slam dunk, and I'll show you what I mean here as we take a look at the latest model runs. High surf advisory for the coastal areas. This is going to be a problem as we go all the way on in through the upcoming week as well, and that extends all the way down the Oregon coast. Also, we've got some flood watches here. I mean, we're not looking at major flooding, but you could get some instances of flooding, especially with drains being clogged and things like that, and the hydrologic outlook for some of the Olympic Mountains there as well. Now, Spokane, I mentioned this morning. This, as we go through the day tomorrow, is probably going to kick on a little bit earlier, some of these winds as we go through the day on Saturday, maybe starting up late morning. So be prepared for that as we go through Saturday night. Some gusts 40, 45 miles per hour, not completely out of the question, and kind of a crosswind there for I-90 and Highway 2. Now, looking at the latest model. So if I take a look at the North American model, this is for this morning here. We had some strong winds up across Whidbey Island, some of the San Juans. I think Whidbey Island topped out at about 58 miles per hour, if I'm not mistaken. It might have bumped up a little bit there now that I'm thinking about it. But anyway, we had some strong winds today, so that's what that is from. But as we go through tomorrow, you can see Seattle topping out around 45. That is fairly substantial there. You're getting up towards the mid and upper 40s for Everett. Coastal areas up towards 50. And you can see Olympia, Tacoma, could be some nuisance power outages, some strong winds across the higher terrain. Even the Willamette Valley, the North American model, shows gusting up into the mid 30s, maybe upper 30s. And you can see that swath of wind going across eastern Washington. Look at that. Some of these gusts getting into the upper 40s. So be prepared for that. And that starts to come as we go through the morning hours. I mean, I know they mentioned it was going to be evening and night, but that is starting a bit earlier, and that could bring some gusty winds to the Tri-Cities as well, some of southeast Washington and some of eastern Oregon. Now, look at the European, though. We had a big change in this 18Z model run data. Look at 38 for Seattle versus 48, what it was showing last night. So we have had, kind of a downgrade in the forecast here. You can see there's Olympia and Tacoma. You might not think that's a big difference, but that's a pretty substantial difference in the power of these wind gusts, 38 versus 48. Still windy tomorrow there and pretty breezy and probably some nuisance power outages, but not quite as strong as what it was showing last night. And you can see some of the differences between some of the higher terrain as well. Now I'll scroll on a little bit further. You can see maybe a gust towards 40 for Spokane. It definitely doesn't look as sinister as what the North American model was showing. Now, this is such an absolutely tedious forecast because this storm is taking such a favorable track that any kind of deviation in the strength of the slow has big impacts on what kind of wind speeds we expect here across the Pacific Northwest. My goodness, this is a nightmare forecast because you can kind of see that low deepening right as it crosses Northwest Washington. And if it comes in a few millibars lower, it's a pretty substantial blow. But if it doesn't really develop too much, it's just going to be blustery and breezy out there. And we're not looking, at anything that would be wind advisory worthy, but it is such a tough forecast. I don't blame the National Weather Service for putting the wind advisory out, but just the caveat that it may not verify. Now, looking at that convergent zone activity there across some of, Snohomish County up into Skagit and Skagit County as well. So as we go through tomorrow night, be aware of that. That frontal system swings through. We get another system there on Monday. There's some differences model to model run on that. And then we get some deep troughing off the coastline, some deep low pressure centers out there. And that may coincide with some high tide activity, some king tide activity, or otherwise known as spring tides on the coastal areas there. So we got to really watch that one. Some of these deep lows and additional storms as we go through next week. Now, taking a look at the wave action, again, as we go through tomorrow, the wave action is increasing for the Washington coast. You can see it there, up and down Oregon, Washington, Vancouver. Just be prepared. Don't turn your back on the ocean. You guys know the drill. Wave action stays elevated as we go towards next week. A little bit of a break there, maybe Tuesday or something, but then you can see these big waves returning as we go through next week. Deep low pressures out there. And again, depends on the exact track of those lows. But yeah, definitely could be active when we're dealing with the king tides on the coastline. That can be a problem. You can get beach erosion and, you can get all kinds of crazy stuff going, some minor flooding along the coastline as well. Now, taking a look at Cape Disappointment. So the high tide coming up tonight is about 6.4 feet. I mean, that's pretty typical. But if we look off towards November 6th afternoon, 10 feet. That's a pretty big difference. And you're looking at 10 feet there again on the 7th. So you got some much bigger tides. Those are the spring tides, or known as the king tides by some. So pretty substantial difference. You're talking about almost 4 foot different water heights. And when you get the lower pressure as well, of course, then the water will bulge along the west coast and we'll get these heights even coming in higher. Then you combine those with strong winds and then you start to see the problem. So what are spring and neap tides? So the spring tide has nothing to do with the seasons. It refers to the springing forth of the tide during the new and the full moon. The neap tide is when the moon is off, on the quadrant there of the sun. When they're lined up together, that is the spring tide or the king tide, because then you get the tidal bulge that really pulls on the oceans of Earth. So there's a spring tide there. And then when it comes up here at a 90-degree angle from the sun, it is a neap tide. And then you go back over here. And then you can imagine the bulge is going to be bigger because both the moon and the sun tug on the tides of Earth. And that's when the king tides happen. Hopefully that makes sense and I didn't just confuse you even more. But now looking at the artificial intelligence as we go through the next couple of weeks, look at some of these precipitation amounts. That's about what Seattle averages in a month. And that's just over the next couple of weeks, some big amounts across the higher terrain. So we do have a very active pattern. And of course, this is subject to change. Make sure to check back daily and we'll try to nail down those details on a daily basis much better. And also just a warning here, when you see these 10-to-1 snow ratio maps, I've scrolled this one all the way out through 15 days. You're like, wow, we're going to get a whole bunch of snow across the Cascades of Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia. But here's the caveat. You go a bit closer, higher resolution, and I'm all the way out 15 days here. This is snow depth in inches. That's not a lot. So right now, there's absolutely no guarantee that there's going to be skiing or anything like that by the time we get towards Thanksgiving. There's always a chance for it, and we'll be watching out for it here as well. I mean, there's some decent amounts across the northern Cascades here, but that's just something we'll be checking out as we go day by day. 6 to 10 day forecast. This has been updated today, above average here in the west coast. Of course, no heat waves or anything. We're just kind of in that southwest moist flow there, and we're not dealing with any kind of big cold air intrusions across the Pacific Northwest. So that's going to be above normal. That makes sense with everything we just looked at, and the above normal signal all the way through November 10th there as well. And yeah, so there could be a minor wind event. Could be a little bit more substantial, again, just depending on how that low pressure center develops as we go. So the wind advisories are up. Just going to keep your wits about you. Maybe some isolated power outages associated with that. And I'll wrap this up here and I'll do my normal briefing tomorrow and I will talk to you guys then.